All right, here we go. Industrialization. There's the 5 information. You guys can look at that on your own. I'm not going to spend too much time. Know that after April the 1st, price goes up to $35. Share it with your people if it's helpful. What we're going to do this time around is we're going to be looking at all right, so we're going to be looking at the what is the Industrial Revolution? What are the main industrial core regions? Remember, it's all about the why of where, right? So we're really going to focus in on that. We're also going to spend some time looking at how models can help us to understand industrial location. In particular, looking at Alfred Weber's least cost theory, all right, or the his triangular model that shows where factories and industries are going to locate due to how they can save costs. And then we're going to look at site and situation factors, which is probably what we're going to spend the majority of our time doing. So, well, the Industrial Revolution, first and foremost. You guys might have learned about this in middle school, and you're definitely going to see about it in some of the other courses you would take later on in your high school career. But the Industrial Revolution is going to first start off in Great Britain. All right, and you might think, well, why is that? And we talked a little bit about this in agriculture. We looked at the second agricultural revolution, the mechanization of agriculture, and one of the things we talked about there was that Great Britain had the factors of production. All right, what I mean by that is they had land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. Those are economics terms, right? So what's happening here is they had their land was relatively undisturbed by war. Everything you got Napoleon, you got the French Revolution, all the different things, and even the wars prior to that going on in Europe, but it didn't really touch the British that much. Gave them more ability to kind of be creative, right? And so you've got these new scientific farmers that began to emerge around the 1700s, early 1700s, and that leads to more food with less farmers having to do the work, right? So what ends up happening as a result is many farmers are out of business, as we've got the enclosure movement we talked about in the second agricultural revolution. The rich, I guess, land-owning farmers are going to buy up a lot of land, enclose them, and do their own thing. This leads to a lot of people who are now out of a farming job. Where the heck are they going to go? Well, in this case, they start to go to cities so they can be laborers. My caption's still on. They want to be let me get loud. They want to be they want to work in factories, right? In the cities where there are jobs still available. So you start to see a lot of urbanization and things like this. They also have land that has a lot of natural harbors, a lot of rivers that they could use for transportation of goods and people, and also as a power source. The earliest industries were water powered, so they would actually channel the water from the river and use that to turn a wheel to run machines. Now, when you're using water power, your factories can only run when the water is right. So this led to the building of dams and things like this. But if the river ever flooded or ever went dry or whatever it might be, or froze over, these are all factors that are going to mess with your industry or your business, right? And so what happens is, at first, new towns emerge along rivers in Great Britain. Eventually, though, with excess technology and things like steam engines and more access to coal-powered machines, they're going to start to be able to locate factories away from just rivers, but also in places that are strategic in terms of where they might have railroads or where different places might be connected. So you've got cities like Manchester that had virtually nobody living there. They're going to just completely swell with large populations, and they're going to become industrial centers in Great Britain. The big changes you need to know about, the big change you need to know about is that it led to different labor structure in Europe and North America. All right, so what I mean by that is, let me get rid of this thing here. I've got all these little icons popping up on me. It's been a while since I used this computer, fellas. You've got less primary jobs and way more secondary. Now, remember last week we talked a little bit about this, or maybe it was the week before that. We were looking at development, and one of the things that you that characterizes a more developed country or even an NIC is going to be more service and industrial sector jobs. So NICs, or newly industrialized countries today, have a lot of manufacturing going on. Right? This is what Great Britain was, more or less, in the 1800s. They had a lot more secondary, in other words, industry-related type jobs, people working factories. And really, these were not factories today that are really robotic and computer-driven, but rather it was low-skill work that someone would run a machine that would do a lot of the work for you. So as long as you can make the machine run, even women and kids would get in on this. And they were generally paid better wages, right? So this is really cool in that people benefit from being able to work in terms of getting paid more money. They could also put their wives to work and their kids. Unfortunately, that ended up being a really bad thing, right? Some of the conditions in these factories were absolutely atrocious, right? But it did start, at least, people making more money, and more people also were able to buy consumable goods that were affordable for most individuals. And so cities began to grow rapidly. Anybody know what that's called, by the way, when you got your cities growing, like a ton of people moving into cities? What's the word for that? Anybody remember? Lay it in the comments for me. All right, so it's going to be a form of migration, and it's going to be a form of interregional migration from rural to your urban areas. But the word I'm looking for is actually urbanization, or the growth of cities, right? So we're going to spend a lot more time in Unit 7 looking at the idea of urbanization, or how cities begin to emerge and grow and how they're structured. But that starts during the Industrial Revolution here. Machines also replaced a lot of manual jobs. And so some people were kind of butthurt about losing their jobs because other machines were able to do it. Kind of like today, right? That's a connection to things like in McDonald's, where you've got, on the one hand, people want to get paid more to work there. And on the other hand, McDonald's is, creating these kiosks that are designed to allow people like me to go in there and hit a couple of buttons and pay right there and get your food. Walmart's doing the same kind of thing with self-checkout lines and U-scans and all this good stuff. So laborers also served as the market for these manufactured goods. So in industrial revolution is more than just people making much stuff. They also need to have markets so that you can sell the stuff they make. So they make a lot of stuff, and it's usually affordable for most people, and they make it in mass. So all this supply actually brings the price of these goods down to a point that ordinary average Joes are able to afford it. And that's kind of a big deal. So people started to maybe, in a sense, live better lives during the Industrial Revolution that definitely led to the way we live today. But it also had like a really dark side involving the child labor and all the ridiculously long hours, and really it didn't lead too many opportunities for the poor to get out of poverty. Maybe they were better off than they were prior to, but they were still extremely poor. Another thing too, just as a precursor to what we're going to look at in Unit 7, is that a lot of these Industrial Revolution towns were unplanned. And what I mean by that is that they just threw buildings together. They didn't do anything super special with them. They were fire hazards. They were trash dumps. I mean, it was pretty disgusting stuff. Shout out to Miss Bannert Slabs. Woo! Do I have any other human geography teachers with me today? I would love to give a shout out to all of them. All right, so this right here, you guys remember this from all right, there you go. Yeah, cool. Great stuff. John at Mansilla. That's totally rad. Thank y'all for being with me tonight. Awesome. Yeah, that's right, Caitlin. All right, so stage 2 of the demographic transition model, you guys remember that from back in Unit 2, looking at population. What's happening here, just as a quick reminder, is that this red represents the natural increase, or that is the population growth that occurs during stage 2. But if you remember, the reason why the population started to grow here is because of people living longer due to more food. In other words, your second agricultural revolution. And people eventually started to move to cities looking for jobs. So stage 2 of the demographic transition in Great Britain started to happen in conjunction with the Industrial Revolution. And then by the time you got maybe moving into late 1800s, early 1900s, that's when you start to see this population growth as the death rate begins, as birth rate begins to go down as well. So that's just a quick relation to previous units. I wanted to show you that. Other previous unit, or I guess relations to previous units, include agriculture, right? We just got done talking about these industrial farms and things like that. The main goods being produced on the onset of the Industrial Revolution was textiles. All right, so when we talk about textiles, we're like anything having to do with cloth, right? So people used to have to go out and they used to shear their sheep and make their own clothes, and if their clothes got messed up, they just didn't, because you couldn't afford to make more clothes. It took too much time and energy. And so at the time prior to Industrial Revolution, there was a lot of people who would make clothing in their houses, right? But then with the yarn, which is the original industry, really, is they would create yarn on bobbins, and they used the spinning jenny or the water frame, however you want to call it. The water frame was a innovative version of the spinning jenny. And then eventually the power loom would do all the weaving for you. And so it was like a majorly easier way to make your food. And it led to eventually even more mechanical looms or things like this. The factories were able to house both the yarn production as well as the cloth production. And people, all they had to do at that point was cut the cloth and make their clothing. So it's kind of a big deal. That was the first industry of the Industrial Revolution. And they couldn't have done it had they not had more agricultural output due to things like cotton. There are some of these inventions I'm talking about. This right here is the spinning jenny or water frame. This right here is the cotton gin. This here is, geez Louise, I done forgot what it is I got there. It was I'm not gonna remember here, but a very, very common invention that helps with part of that process as well. There's also increased populations in cities. We just talked about the urbanization. Was that the power loom, John? So I guess it was. Yeah, that's exactly what it was. Yep, thank you. All right, so you've got the increasing population in cities led to a need to increase sanitation. All right, learn how to control pandemics, different diseases. People were all close together. They're getting more diseases like things like cholera, which is really going to come from your contaminated water. You guys remember Jon Snow back from Unit 1. By the way, there is a group of people that make video game videos, and they actually make history as well. It's called Extra History. All right. If you want to know a little bit more about the cholera, as well as what I'm talking about here with trying to control pandemics, look up Extra History Jon Snow. It's a 3-part series where they talk about this one guy who was the first to really use geospatial maps in order to help us understand how to control problems like cholera outbreaks in Great Britain. But things like that all of a sudden start to become really important. All right. Cities began to expand horizontally because of transportation innovation. So when I mean horizontal, I mean that they would spread out a lot more. This is going to eventually lead to your suburbs and your urban sprawl and things like this. Also, you've got, in order to gain access to new markets, the Industrial Revolution kind of led to European countries' efforts to control big parts of Africa and Asia in order to have more markets as well as more resources to fuel their industrial growth. So we've already looked at connections to Unit 2, connections to Unit 1, connections to Unit 4, to Unit 7, which we hadn't even gotten to yet. So there's a lot of application to this topic of industrial growth. Let me find my cursor again. The Industrial Revolution is an ever-changing process. If you look up different phases of the Industrial Revolution, they usually are going to be broken down into 4 different eras. Now, for the sake of the AP Human Geography exam, I swear you don't need to know all that. You just know that the Industrial Revolution is characterized by the mass production of manufactured goods that leads us to where we are today. But again, it's about the spatial perspective. So the main thing you want to know is how it spreads, right? But that said, it's also important to understand kind of the progression of the Industrial Revolution over time. And so when you think about these earlier industries, Fordism is the first thing that I kind of think about. And even though Henry Ford lived well into the end of, I guess, the Industrial Revolution starts in around 1750. by 1800, it had diffused to parts of Europe, and by the mid 1800s, big time in the United States. So what I'm saying is that Ford isn't at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, but what he does with his assembly line production is he creates a process by which individual workers, as you can see here in the picture, they work on creating, I guess, one part of the Model T. Now, at this time, Ford wasn't diversifying what he created. There was one car that he would make. I think I've got a quote in here. Any customer can have any car painted any color he wants, so long as it's black, right? All Model Ts were exactly the same. They looked the same. They worked the same way because each of these dudes on the assembly line is making one part. They got one job. You see, they're making one specific part of that machine, and they're going to move it on down the line. So when we talk about Fordism, we're looking at the Fordist assembly line approach. Okay, while this process revolutionized the production of products, right, there was very little variability, and so yeah, this is a big deal. Even the Soviets are like, wow, this is amazing. They were able to be more productive in their work and stimulate their economy. But over time, people kind of get sick of the same old thing. And I mean, we put out new phones every few months and new cars every single year. Something's got to be different about it. So that people are going to go and sell their iPhone 9 and buy the iPhone 10 and be ready for the next iPhone that's going to come out in a few years, right? So the reason why I'm saying this is because with no variation to the products that Ford made, it didn't take very long before individuals are going to start craving more variation in their products. And so when you start talking about post-Fordism, you're not looking at this cookie cutter assembly line with relatively low skilled workers doing the same thing all day. You start trying to find ways to create different variations of that product that people can buy at different maybe income levels or whatever it might be, right? Post-Fordism takes into account a lot of changes, including socioeconomic accessibility and service sector economic activities. So it's also not just clean-cut manufacturing. It's a little bit more, complex is probably the best word for this. For our discussion, we'll look at it like this. In post-Fordist industries, you've got computerized mechanization. So they might have machines in the assembly line, but when you're looking at the way things are manufactured today, machines are far more complex and are run off of software, and people can make those machines do different things based on whatever ways they program it. There's also variable automation. The machines can do a variety of things. I just said that. Increased efficiency with less people, so you can do more with even less. So, I mean, that's really what Industrial Revolution is the idea of producing a ton of manufactured goods with way less people who would, instead of doing the work manually, would run a machine. It's like hitting print and printing 100 copies of a worksheet rather than having to write it out by hand. And then there's also going to be more specialized laborers who may work many different kinds of jobs at a particular factory as opposed to just one. So instead of seeing these dudes here, they're doing that one thing on the assembly line, you might have other individuals that might run a certain machine, but on some days, he might do a completely different job related to the overall production of the product. One of the best ways that I can show you all this is by talking about a recent experience that I had. I go to these different geography seminars that are offered by our Geographic Alliance here in South Carolina, which they are fantastic people. Love the Geographic Alliance. But one of the things we did in like January or February was we went to a Starbucks roasting facility, and there's only a handful of these in the country, but we have one just outside of Columbia. So what you're seeing there is Charleston. Now, Charleston is extremely important to the location of that Starbucks roasting facility, as well as a lot of other things. Anybody know what is so important about Charleston here? What am I getting at, y'all? What happens at Charleston? Automation will eventually swell up a whole entire workforce. Maybe. It's a port, Logan. That's exactly right. And so it's one of the oldest ports in the country, actually. But what happens here is that this particular site is you can also see, if you zoom up a little bit, you've got Interstate 20 right here going all the way clear down to Charleston. So what you're going to see here is that these goods, in this case, all kinds of goods. But in Starbucks' case, raw coffee beans are going to be brought in their burlap sacks from wherever it is that coffee is being produced for Starbucks, and they're going to be removed from ships at this point. Then they're going to be put on trucks and taken up the interstate to about this star. And that right there is where the Starbucks roasting facility is, kind of just outside of Swansea, South Carolina, a few miles south of Columbia. And so very easy access to the port. You don't want to be right here on the coast, right next to a port, but you want to be close enough that you can get here in a couple hours. It's like, honest to God, probably an hour and 20 minutes if you drive right. And then you get here, you unload the coffee beans, and then you roast them and get them ready for market. Anybody know how long this process takes? There's a closer up of it. You still can't see it. Y'all, no kidding. We're going to get to this a little bit more detail towards the end of this presentation, but all this Starbucks coffee gets there and gets roasted and sent back out to be sold at local stores. And I say local stores, regional stores, in about 48 hours max. No coffee is going to stay there more than 2 days. And so that's what I mean when I'm talking about all this complexity up here, the computerized mechanization, the variable automation, the increased efficiency. That's the kind of output I'm talking about here. Rachel, if you got a question, do you see at the bottom of your screen where it says ask a question? Put it there for me. And the reason why I'm going to ask you to do that is because I can timestamp it. So when people go back with their 501 Plus account, they can go in and actually click on that question and be able to see it again and hear my answer. So go ahead and type it out there for me, and then we will definitely take time to stop and look at it. And that goes for any of you. If y'all have any questions, by all means, take the time to ask it. I mean, I got started late, but I'm certainly not going to leave until I'm done. So host person, have a question. All right, y'all can stick it in the ask a question for me. All right, so that right there is kind of a blown up map showing, again, the roasting facility in South Carolina. And what I wanted you to see here is look at the interstate network. These are all interstates that you're seeing here. And so from right here, kind of in the center of South Carolina, this roasting facility will actually serve Starbucks stores as far over as Texas. All right, and now up here, there's another roasting facility, and there's one out west somewhere, and maybe one somewhere in between. I think there's only like 4 of these, or maybe 5 in the whole country, if I can remember correctly. I think I might even have them in here somewhere. And this right here is another thing that I wanted y'all to see is that this is the Starbucks roasting facility that serves all this area over this way, and then over here you've got the population map. You would have 2 roasting facilities up this way, if I'm not mistaken, and then 1 over this way, or maybe 2 over this way towards the west, serving the West Coast. All right, let's take a look at this question real quick. With your Starbucks example, is that like agglomeration because the transportation is close, or no? All right, so is this agglomeration? Yes, but probably not so much in the way you're thinking. And we are definitely going to spend a lot more time looking at agglomeration at the end, and I'll make that make a lot more sense. But the thing that I want you to know about this is that factories and different industries like Starbucks are going to be located kind of within that same area. Not other Starbucks facilities, but other things that are going to share in things from infrastructure to the cost of labor to the truck driving, all those different things there. So, ladies and gentlemen, what she's asking about, this term called agglomeration, is definitely something that we need to know, and that's the reason why I'm going to take way more time in about 20 minutes talking about it. But it's the idea that people are going to locate next to their competition, or in a way that's going to allow them to share in the cost as well as in the benefit of what it is they're trying to produce. And it is, believe it or not, a win-win for everyone. So we will look at that a little bit, that topic of agglomeration a little bit further down the line. Good question, Rachel. Very good question. All right. So the one thing I wanted to make sure that I ring home before I go any further in this presentation is that I kind of subtly started looking at what we're going to consider site and situation factors. Now, this is good old-fashioned Unit 1 stuff, but I know that in some cases, the teachers might manage to make it all the way through a class without referring to these terms again and again. And so if that's the case that you guys are dealing with, and you can't remember exactly what site and situation are, I want to take a brief second to make sure we understand, because the rest of this presentation is going to be centered on this. When I'm always talking about what I call the spatial perspective, all right, spatial, well, where have I spelled right? Perspective, all right, and I say the Y of where, what I'm talking about more or less or site and situation. So site refers to what a place is like, and those characteristics are not only describe the physical environment, it also describes the people, the culture, the infrastructure. All these things refer to the site, or the physical description, physical and cultural description of a place. Situation is going to refer to where something is in relation to other things. So if we look at Charleston here, the site can be described by the fact that it's a port, by the fact that there's a lot of ship activity, by the fact that this is a break of bulk point, which means that you're going to find goods are going to be taken from a ship and put onto trains, and also put onto trucks to be transported to other places. And it's got an interstate and all this stuff. Those are site factors. Situationally, all right, Starbucks is located near the Port of Charleston. So it's situated in central South Carolina, about an hour and 20 minutes away from the port. That's the situation. And those two things are so important for how people are going to locate industries if they want their industries to ever be anything and not just a bunch of crap. So with that said, Starbucks is located near Columbia, all right, which gives it access to things like the port and gives it access to the interstate system. There's 3 interstates that go right through Columbia: I-20, I-26, and I-77. Finished products can easily be moved by truck across the interstates. And also, this particular roasting facility is clustered around service regions within the population. What I mean by that is that they have access to areas where they're going to serve in that one region. And then you've got other places up north that are going to serve their populations. What do I have here? Oh, yeah. Okay, so I'll list them out. There are 5 company-owned Starbucks roasting facilities in the United States. Apparently, it's Nevada, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, Washington, and then there's apparently one in the Netherlands as well. Maybe more than that, but definitely those in the United States. All right, so what are we looking at here? Let me make sure I didn't skip anything. Once again, Google Maps image, but do y'all see what the location here is? What we're looking at? What is that? FedEx World Headquarters. All right, so I use Amazon Prime, and all of our stuff comes in UPS. But we're going to look at FedEx right now because, believe it or not, and I know you already know this because you guys are geographers, and we study the why of where. But there is a clear-cut reason, why FedEx is right there. No, it's actually Memphis, Tennessee. Ohio would probably be a little bit. There we go. It's right there. So the scale and the distortion make it kind of look a little bit bigger than it might be. But that's Memphis, Tennessee, is where you're gonna see FedEx. And there is the borders there. Memphis is dangerous. Kids, don't go. I don't know anything. I've been to Nashville recently, and I thought it was pretty cool. But never been to Memphis. But nonetheless, that's where you're going to find FedEx, and it's not there by accident. Man, they were so important, I guess, intentional when they put it there. And here are some of the reasons. So if you right now, situationally, what can you say about the situation of FedEx headquarters? Where is it situated within the United States? Like, thinking geographically, yeah, we can say it's in Tennessee, but Logan, that right there is the key. It's in the middle of the country, right? In fact, if you look back at the population, it's like kind of in the center of population. You remember that picture in the Rubenstein book with the center of population kind of does this number right here. I mean, Memphis is like more or less dead center in that location. So it's definitely centrally located. What else can we say about the situation just by looking at this map? It's kind of the same as what we were looking at with the Starbucks facility. What's all around it? It's not near water. You're right about that. Where are all these little yellow lines? All right, so population clusters, absolutely. But these yellow lines here, That's going to be your interstate network. Absolutely. It's going to give it access so you can get those trucks on the road. Now, we also know that FedEx is going to do more than just have trucks on the interstate, right? They're also going to get involved in things like airplanes. You've got these different cargo ships and stuff. A few weeks ago, we were talking about some of those. What do you notice about Memphis, Tennessee, and this particular map? I love living in South Carolina, and the reason I love living in South Carolina, guys, I mean, I'm telling you, man, I don't care about snow, right? I don't want snow, but right here is roughly Memphis, and you're right there on the line where there's practically no snow, so you can get airplanes and things like that back and forth. You're not going to run into issues with things getting backlogged so much because of lack of access to the headquarters. So that's definitely one thing that's really important to location of that headquarters. There is a political site factor. Now, this here gets into something that maybe you guys have looked at and maybe you haven't, but does anybody know the difference between a right to work state and one of the gray states, which is labeled as forced unionism? Texas is the best, and that's that. Yeah, I know Texas is pretty serious about their state, that's for sure. I'll let y'all think that. What's a right to work state, y'all? Unionizing is usually banned and often discouraged. John, you're absolutely right. So if we look back at early industrial revolution stuff, we talked about how terrible the conditions were and how people had no rights and no to do anything about those working conditions. Well, unions existed to give people power over their employers. So they allow people to have a voice, and they do a lot of giving voice to individuals. So you might hear about some of these, for example, recent teacher strikes over the last year, where teachers are disgruntled because they are dealing with so much stuff, and the pay is actually going down when you look at the price of the cost of living and all these different things. And so a lot of these teachers are walking out. Now, some of these walkouts, as a matter of fact, weirdly, were in right to work states, but a lot of the places where people are going to walk out and strike is going to be because a union is going to organize that strike so that the workers can get better benefits. Now, a lot of people are really against the idea of unionism and strikes and things, and some people are going to say, well, this doesn't have a place anymore in modern society. But no matter how you slice it, FedEx does not want its people to walk out on their jobs. So that is another thing that really plays in, is they want to go in a place where you're not going to see forced labor unions. They are going to rally behind workers' plight and make them walk out of their job. So a lot of factories look at those things. And then this map here kind of shows I guess you're looking at kind of like the region of influence where they're able to get in a certain amount of time. You can see that this here is roughly 1 day's trucking, 2 days trucking. These are routes that are served from Memphis, and I think it's more than just, in general, it's more than just looking at FedEx. Memphis is somewhat of a centralized hub for the entire country. So it's not just a FedEx thing. It's FedEx recognizes that, as do a lot of other industries. I think I've got a quick snip from an article on this. Geography, transportation, infrastructure, and strong distribution sector make Memphis a natural logistics hub. All right. Later on, you've got where runway, river, rail, and road converge. So they've got access to all of these different things that allow for easy and relatively inexpensive transportation. Later on down there, it's a natural hub for distribution throughout the United States and across the globe. So Memphis actually has somewhat of a name as being a city that is centrally located for all kinds of manufacture, I guess all kinds of industries, and also some services as well. Okay, so how does this relate to what's going on in the news right now? You guys have probably heard about the idea that Amazon, hey, they're going to build this massive second headquarters in New York City, and everything's like, wow, we're so excited about this. And then all of a sudden it comes out that Amazon is going to pull out of this agreement. And then you've got Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, who is all kind of in the mix with all this whole thing. And she's been getting a lot of publicity and stuff for her green New Deal, as well as this right here. And so she's been in the news a lot. But all this kind of stuff links in because it has to do with site and situation factors, right? So this article is an article called 5 Reasons Why New York and Arlington Were Amazon's Choice for Headquarters 2. By the way, Arlington is we're talking Virginia. They were going to split their headquarters into these 2 different places. But you've got your access to talent. Okay, you're attracting and retaining employees. Your infrastructure. Incentives, yes, they were going to receive big tax write-off or different types of incentives for locating in New York City, and also political considerations. All of these 5 things, y'all, these are site factors, right? These are things that that make New York a pretty location for Amazon to locate their new headquarters facility. And I would say that there's not one that might be more important than the other. I mean, they want to have infrastructure for the sake of being able to do what they need to do. Now, Amazon is a tech company, all right? So we're not looking at, they're not making stuff. This is it's kind of like a Silicon Valley type industry, all right? So they're looking for a place where you're going to find people who want to work in that kind of a field. So when they go to a place like New York, yes, everyone's like, they're going to pay way more for the land. The cost of living there is going to be more expensive for them. They're going to have to pay more to their employees, but you get what you pay for, right? They know that smart, geeky, engineer type people that could build their business are more likely to want to live in a place like Tennessee than a place like Tennessee, in a place like New York City than in a place like Detroit, for example. All right, they know that, so they're willing to pay more to get what they need in order to make their business as productive and as fruitful as they possibly can. The incentives were a big deal. The one part where things kind of fell through was this political considerations. All right. Well, Alfred Weber's least cost theory also plays into the location, the site and situation factors. All right. So it's similar to von Thunen's model. Von Thunen's model was rural land use. Okay. What Weber is looking at is where our industry is going to locate with relation to your inputs, in other words, the resources that go into creating whatever your product is, and the market. And again, one of the biggest things that they're going to be thinking about for this model is the cost of transportation. All right, so I've got that here. You also think about labor costs and agglomeration factors in as well, because if you've got the right things by agglomerating with other companies, then you can even overlook higher transportation labor, as we just now saw with Amazon. And in order to really understand what this looks like, we need to know about bulk reducing and bulk increasing. Now, check it out. Sometimes you will see these things called weight gaining and weight decreasing. Now, know that on paper, the definitions are exactly the same, but I prefer bulk reducing and bulk increasing to weight gaining and weight decreasing. And the reason that I prefer that, and I think others do as well, is because you can have certain things that don't necessarily weigh a lot, all right, when they're manufactured, they are still going to be considered bulk increasing. And a perfect example of that would be a product that's really, really breakable. Okay, so think about potato chips. When you cut up a potato, all right, potatoes are going to be really heavy whenever you first get them out of the ground. But you can throw them in the back of a truck. I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever seen a potato harvester. Go on YouTube and Google, or I guess YouTube, potato harvesting. You'll see what they do. They just throw those potatoes up in a big truck, and you don't need to be super gentle with them. But what happens when you make potato chips and you put them in all these little bags? Can you just throw them around and put a bunch of stuff on top of them? So the reason why I'm telling you this is because because of how careful you would need to be with transporting something such as I don't know, potato chips or eggs or whatever it might be. It would cost more to transport these things due to the fact you had to do it in a special way that you would have to be careful. So it could be considered to be bulk increasing. And so even though it doesn't gain more weight, that's the connection I'm trying to make here. Yes. So a example of a bulk increasing industry all right, would be something, or a bulk gaining would be any kind of beverage company, right? So when you when places like Coca-Cola, when they're making, I guess they have facilities that make their products and bottle them up and all that. What they do is they locate the bottling facilities in places around large urban markets. So you might have a bottling facility, for example, in Atlanta, all right, right in the middle of the city. You don't want to have your Coke bottling company in the middle of, or factory in the middle of Podunkington, USA, where they have to drive a ton of miles in order to get to the market. You want to have it in a place that is accessible by the market. So what they do is, water is basically universal, right? So anywhere you can get water, you can make Coke if you have the ingredients. So they would transport the ingredients to the factories, where they would mix it all up, put it in bottles, and then send it a short distance, because it costs a lot, it's bulk gaining, send it a short distance into your local stores for sale. So any kind of beverage company is going to be a bulk gaining product. Another example is, I have it here written as fabricated, or I guess I don't have it written here, but any kind of fabricated product, or a product that's made out of other things being put together in a certain location, is going to be an example of a bulk gaining product. So you have cars are bulk gaining. Cars are bulk gaining. Computers are bulk gaining. These are all examples of something like that. Now, bulk decreasing. Can you close the door for me, sweetie? Bulk decreasing is going to be something like copper smelting, or refining some kind of metal, or steel production. Any of these things that involves taking the actual pure product out of the original ore. So if you look at this, smelting is a process of applying heat to ore in order to extract out a metal base. So copper production actually reduces the weight, because the pure copper weighs less than it did with all the other crap still in it. All right. Other bulk reducing industries include something like paper production, all right, or lumber production, or steel, because the heavy trees, you take away from that and you get your lumber. You take away from that, you get your paper. All right, these are all bulk reducing industries. Now, you'll see where Weber's model uses a location triangle in order to kind of map out, generally speaking, where a factory or an industry might locate relative to the resources or inputs and the market. So in the case of our Coca-Cola example, if you want to use the triangle, what you could do is, let's say there are two different resources that go into making Coca-Cola, but we know there's bulk gaining. So no matter where that factory is going to be, we know it's going to be closer to the market, because the cost of the inputs way less than the cost of the finished product. And that's really how you would use the triangle in Weber's model. Another example might be, if you're looking at, let's say, automobile manufacturer. Like, so let's say that Honda has a manufacturing plant. You might have all the different products. So it could be more than just one or two resources, y'all. This is just a model that demonstrates the overall concept. So you might have the seats, the steering wheels. You might have the I don't know, whatever the dashboard is going to be, the different parts of the trunk or the engine. And what they might do is come near to their market, which would be the assembly plant. And then the assembly plant would be next to wherever it needs to be transported to your dealers. All right. So that's really how the least cost theory works with the triangle model, the Weber least cost theory model. Now, that brings us back to our discussion about agglomeration. So when we talk about agglomeration, the definition of that, and I would definitely write this down. If you don't know it off the top of your head, you need to know this one. You need to know it. That is, it's the idea that factories and businesses can share in the cost of operations in certain locations. All right. So if the screen froze, then refresh. I hope you guys, if the screen froze, I hope you can still hear me. But if you look here at this food exit 234, man, you got some good stuff there. If you're trying to dine in on the cheap, you got McDonald's. You got Chick-fil-A, that's God's food right there, man. Yeah, I had some Chick-fil-A just tonight. If you need a little bit of coffee, you got McDonald's, got some good coffee. Starbucks is right there. If you're looking for 24-hour service, you got IHOP. So, I mean, honestly now, if you're hungry, where are you more likely to stop? Are you more likely to stop right there, or maybe the next exit that has, I don't know, White Castle? You guys ever been to White Castle? Ew, how gross is that? All right, so this right here is another example of I guess when you look at restaurants, that's a really good example of agglomeration, because it seems that they're always gonna be right down the road from other restaurants. And why would they want that? Why would Taco Bell want to be here with Subway, and why would Sunoco want to be here with Shell, and why would, I guess this is old school, I don't even know if Quiznos is still around, but you got Quiznos and Blimpie. Man, you got all these different gas stations and convenience stores. Why would they want to be near each other? Very simple. If you're right here, you're no In-N-Out. Yeah, we don't have a whole lot of In-N-Outs around here. We do have Cookout. Exactly, Caitlin. They attract one another, so people are more likely to make a stop at a place where they have a variety of options. And so all these places here, they literally do business more because other ones are there with them. All right. So here's a perfect example. Just looking at my one family, but we might go to, let's say that it's Christmas time, and we drive all the way out to this place somewhere just past Charlotte, North Carolina, and we end up going to the Polar Express. It's just cheap little train ride. It costs a tremendous amount of money for just a cheap entertainment that my kids just love. They can't get enough of it. But on the way back, it's like 11 o'clock at night. I'm tired. I gotta drive 2 hours down the road, so we stop at Starbucks and get coffee. But then my kids see McDonald's, they want McDonald's. And then we're like, wow, there's Taco Bell. So we'll get coffee at Starbucks, we'll get a Happy Meal at McDonald's, and then we'll drive to Taco Bell and grab a couple of tacos, and man, now we're ready to go home. So if they weren't all right there next to each other, people like me wouldn't be able to go and buy all their food. And so they would actually they would benefit less if they weren't together than they do if they are together. I used to live in North Carolina. Man, I'm telling you, if there's any other place other than South Carolina I would love to live, it would be in the mountains over near Hendersonville. And that is just fantastic. We took our honeymoon over that way around Black Mountain. Okay, another example of agglomeration, and that's one point I want to make, is that this is small scale agglomeration, y'all, but you've also got different agglomeration at different scales. And this right here is Silicon Valley. What happens at Silicon Valley, ladies and gentlemen? For time's sake, I'll go ahead and go down a slide. Large businesses, but in particular, different types of tech businesses like Amazon, Facebook, Apple, Google. All right, this right here, actually, I don't see any of these. Maybe it's not the best graphic, but you got different electronics and entertainment, like TV manufacturers and things like this. But when we think about Silicon Valley, we're thinking about places like Facebook, Apple, Google. I mean, Boeing, places like that. And this map here actually goes to show that there's more than just Silicon Valley. There are other technopoles in other parts of the country that also specialize in technology type jobs. And a technopole is a hub for information-based industries and high-tech manufacturing. So in Silicon Valley, you've got places like Boeing making airplanes, and you've got Facebook doing their stuff, and Google. But over here, we already talked about how in Silicon Alley, in other words, around New York or the New England region, you've got other tech places like Amazon looking to locate their second headquarters. Google also has huge offices in Manhattan. So you've got other places than just Silicon Valley that are agglomerates for these high-tech industries. What are the things that they share then? If they're all agglomerating, they're there so they can share in both the costs and the benefits. Well, we can look back a few slides and see that some of the things that Amazon was hoping to cash in on is qualified laborers, high-tech individuals, people that can they have good infrastructure, all these different things, different types of government incentives. These are all things that if you locate right here where Google is, you get to share in all of those benefits as well as the cost of staying there. All right, the infrastructure costs, for example. I mean, if you have one industry that uses a certain power source or has all this different, I guess, you might need trucking associated with it. I don't know. All the other industries in that area can share in the cost of those things as well, so that they don't have to locate in a place completely isolated from all the. I mean, Facebook would do no good to move right here. Because if they moved here, chances are all the people that work for Facebook are going to be like, heck, man, I'm not moving right here in the middle of wherever that is, Idaho or you know, wherever. I'm gonna stay here and work in for Google now, or work for whatever else is going to be. So there are reasons for industries to agglomerate. For example, they want to be where their suppliers and customers and competitors are, where qualified workers are available to hire them. These are the things they're going to share, y'all. They locate where their desired employees are willing to live. All right, and in that last sentence there, they're not looking to move to Cleveland. All right, they're looking to move to places maybe a little bit more upscale, places where they might have to spend a little bit more money, but they're going to make a lot working for these companies. I have a question. So Silicon Valley and Alley are just big business headquarters. Specifically, don't think business, think information technology, or think about things that would be along the line of what a company like Apple or Facebook would do. Also, you think about something like Boeing. These are industries that make airplanes. By the way, one of the things about Boeing, the United States being the last to ground the Boeing airplanes, is because it's an American company. It's a big time American company. So different types of high-end industries like that. That's where you're going to have. That's where you go. That's what you're thinking about with Silicon Valley. So as opposed to something like banking, for example, there are going to be other hubs for banking, such as maybe Charlotte is one. But if you're looking at tech or high-end information type jobs, that's going to be Silicon Valley or some of these other technopoles. Okay, so Cleveland is in Ohio. All right. I missed one there. There are also political site factors. All right. So we've looked at some economic site factors. We looked at some of the other things. Would it be a CBD? CBD is going to be the central business district. Really, any city, large or small, is going to have a CBD. So Cleveland would have a central business district. I live in near a small town. In fact, we were voted South Carolina's best small town like a couple of years ago in Aiken, South Carolina. Even Aiken is going to have a central business district, and it's going to be really what the downtown area is going to be. We'll look more at that in Unit 7 for sure. But political site factors, things like tax breaks or tax holidays. A tax holiday is like, let's say they go 3 years without having to pay any kind of taxes. These are things that are going to entice companies to come. But yes, that might be something that your liberal left is going to look at Amazon and all the tax breaks and all the incentives they get from New York and say, oh my gosh, we can give that to the poor. But in order for a company, and they are competitive, places are going to vie for those in places like Amazon to go and locate in their towns. And so, yes, they're going to offer incentives to make it more enticing. You also have loans. States might give loans to certain companies to locate in their area. And sometimes those loans might be forgivable or at least have reduced interest rates, right? It's kind of the same for schools, right? Certain schools give certain students scholarships if they want them there, or good student loan rates or whatever it might be, in order to maybe have the right sports team or whatever it might be. They also might have direct assistance programs where they give land to different businesses. They might also have changes in regulations, or in other words, laws or whatnot that might weaken unions or reduce environmental rules because they want to, I don't know, boost their local economy. They might have to have some give and take. So let's reduce some environmental rules on emissions and go ahead and let this factory build so that we can put a lot of people to work. Those are some of the different political site factors that you will see with more than just Amazon. Y'all, this is super common stuff. So in the case with Amazon, probably the main reason that they backed out, from what I've gathered, and there could be others, but from what it sounds like, they pulled out because they didn't have enough political backing. there was a huge movement led by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to get them out of there, because it seemed almost like just more money for the pockets of billionaires rather than money that could be given to the poor. And when they start to see that kind of pressure, they're like, we don't need New York, and New York don't need us bad enough for all that. So they pulled out. More recently, the South has also started to become a desired spot for factories to thrive due to more cheaper land as well as quick market accessibility. So, for example, and I think I've got a map, auto industries. This is relatively new, y'all. We know that this area over here, this is known as Auto Alley, kind of this region near like a belt, like an automotive production belt that existed along the states south of the Great Lakes. But then eventually you start to see where a lot of these car manufacturing plants start to locate in places along the south. And there's a reason for that, y'all. You can look at a map that shows the distribution of the Amish over time, and you can see a very similar phenomenon. There's no land up here in these densely populated regions, and so they would move out in areas where there's more land. In the same way, with the inventions of different types of transportation inventions and air conditioning is important for a lot of manufacturers and things like this, you start to see where more and more of these factories are locating in places like rural South Carolina, where they can spread out and not build vertical factories, but build factories that are super sprawled out, and they can use different types of tools and tractors and things to do everything on one story. So there's more land. The land is cheaper. The interstate access here, where this BMW plant is immediate. They can get it to where they need it to go throughout the most populated regions in New England or wherever it might be, or throughout the Southeast. And it's also, South Carolina is a right to work state, as is a lot of your southern states. Seems to be more of a conservative phenomenon. So lately, auto manufacturing plants have really looked at the South, and they're like, wow, this is really good for us. And it's really good for South Carolina too, and Georgia, and whoever else gets these factories, because they attract more jobs. And when you attract more jobs, you start to attract more people. Your state starts to kind of specialize in a certain product. You can see that South Carolina apparently has Mercedes, Honda, and BMW in it. And so others that want to agglomerate and capitalize on those same laborers, the same market, the same infrastructure, might also locate their plants in southern states. So this is something that has started to happen over the last maybe 20 years or 25 or so years. There's another example. I've got least cost theory up here, by the way. I meant to change that from these slides. I didn't. I guess we're kind of still talking about site and situation factors which factor in least cost, but this is really just looking at the site and situation factors. So not directly related to the least cost theory. But these right here, again, are different types of auto manufacturers and the different locations of their factories. You can see that a lot of them are clustered here in this region, but over time, they've started to kind of go a little bit further south. And yes, if you look even further south, you would see that a lot of them locate in Mexico. And a lot of other auto assembly plants are starting to relocate in other NICs, or newly industrialized countries, which are kind of like your stage 3 countries in the demographic transition. Where am I at? Other political site factors, we just already looked at this, didn't we? I'm not sure why I have that slide twice. Situation factors are going to include things like industries want to locate near strategic points. And so I've got this word break of bulk, and I used it earlier, right? What happens at a break of bulk point is this is a location where different types of transportation is going to change. So you would have, I gotta go to the gym. I didn't make it to the gym today, actually. I feel you there. But a break of bulk point is going to be like a ship is going to go to a port, and they're going to literally unload the big shipping containers and put it into an area to be loaded onto a truck, or to be loaded onto a train, or whatever it might be. So certain train stations where you see this same process occur, from maybe train to truck, or maybe a truck to an airplane. These are all going to be places where the mode of transportation is going to change. Those are breakup bulk points. And it is super important for certain industries to locate near those changes. Here's what it looks like. Here's an example of what I guess eNote says it is. A break and bulk point is going to be a place where cargo is shifted from one form of transportation to another. And you can see the machines moving the shipping containers from wherever this truck is onto wherever it's going to go. I can't see the picture well enough. Here are ports. This is the port of Charleston. This is the port of Jacksonville. Here is maybe a port, but what I wanted you to see here is that here are the containers on the ground, and here is a truck with a container on it. That container might contain all sorts of stuff, from Starbucks coffee beans to whatever it is I just ordered from Amazon. Here is a train getting loaded up with shipping containers. So these containers, y'all, revolutionize the way things get across the earth. I mean, they're uniform, so you can stack them up like Legos. You can fit a bunch of stuff in them, big and small, and it reduces the cost of transportation because of how much you can put on these cargo barges. So I know that I've gone already an hour and 5 minutes and also got started a little bit later, but I'm just about there. If you guys can stick with me, that'd be awesome. We're looking at the last thing I wanted to show you, one of the most important things having to do with industrial regions. This is the last thing I'm going to show you here. So what this map is showing you is that there are certain places where you're going to see the most manufacturing. I want to say these places that are highlighted in the red are going to be responsible for like 70 or more % of the world's manufacturing. That's a huge amount. But then you've also got these secondary industrial regions in places like Mexico, in places like Brazil, in places like South Africa and India. All right, these are going to be largely your NICs. Mexico, Brazil, India. These are stage 3 countries with a large manufacturing sector, and what they do is they manufacture stuff, but not nearly to the same amount of I guess efficiency or productivity as what you might would see in some of these core regions. So I wanted to break it down. What you're looking at here is your European core. Last week we talked about the core periphery model, right? We looked at Wallerstein's world systems theory, and that's what this is looking at, kind of the same exact core region. But one thing you notice here is that all these little orange specks are going to be your major industrial districts within Europe. Notice that you've got a lot of them in Britain, you've got a lot of them in Germany, you've got a lot of them in the eastern part of France, in the northern part of Italy. Barcelona is actually in the Catalan autonomous region of Spain. But notice that Spain isn't part of the core. Notice that Italy isn't part of the core. This is your economic core. And actually, as a matter of fact, Germany is, as I've already said in an earlier presentation, the single most productive, I guess the highest GDP, the most economically valuable country in the European Union. And Britain and France are kind of like in the top 3 or 4 as well. But this here is always has been, ever since the Industrial Revolution, your economic core in Europe. All right, so main industries of Germany, the main things that these guys are producing, y'all, is Germany is dominated by manufacturing industries, including automotive, chemicals, metals such as iron and steel for maybe building something or building planes or whatever it might be, electrical equipment, coal, so they have resources, ships, machine tools. These guys are building some pretty complex stuff. They're putting together pharmaceuticals as well, plastic goods. They export a ton of this stuff to other parts of the world. Some of the things they're exporting include aircraft and spacecraft materials. In China, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 different industrial regions in China, and those are labeled here on my map. Northeast is going to be one of their original manufacturing regions. The northern district is Beijing, right here. Right, the Shanghai district and Guangzhou district are probably the most beneficial, I guess, for them today. These are also the places where you look along the Chinese coast. These cities have grown in like maybe 20 years time, y'all. You can actually find before and after pictures of a place like Shanghai, and it would blow your mind how big those cities are due to the urbanization brought about because of these industrial jobs. In fact, you may or may not have learned this in your population unit. But when you look at migrations, the interregional migration between China's rural west and their urban east is the single largest historical interregional migration in the face of human history. Right? But many outsource manufacturing jobs for access to cheaper labor markets from developing core regions. What I'm saying here is that a lot of the jobs that used to occur in the United States and Europe those are the jobs that are being outsourced here. Things like textile productions, things like making shirts and jeans and shoes and stuff like that. Those are the kind of jobs you're never going to see come back to the United States because they're taking advantage of cheaper laborers as well as maybe cheaper restrictions in places like China. I'm actually going to skip this map here just for time's sake, but these here are the industrial regions in Russia. And then let's look right here at this map. This here is showing North America. We're a huge manufacturing country. You've got your New England into the Great Lakes has always been our industrial core. What connections can you make between the manufacturing cores as well as this region here, as well as these other regions where a lot of manufacturing is going, versus the map on the left? Notice your gas, your oil, your coal fields, right? And then look at the industries, especially over here. You can see clear connections between the resources and the industries that had kind of been done in this region of the country since the country has hit the Industrial Revolution. You've also got the Appalachian region, which is not too far away from these resources. You've also got this area over here, which is again very close to the resources that are available. Usually, I guess mainly natural gas in this area. And then up here in Canada and the northern United States, here's where you're going to see more and more fracking going on, which is the process by which oil is extracted from a different type of soil known as tar sands. So if you ever watched the Leonardo DiCaprio Before the Flood documentary, that's what you're seeing in that. Largest manufacturing industries in the United States revenue, y'all almost done, include petroleum, steel, automobiles, aerospace, telecommunications, chemicals, electronics, so on and so forth. Boeing, here's a headline that I looked at just the other day. As Europe and others ground Boeing 737 because of the recent crashes that you're hearing about in the news, the United States holds back. The reason is because it's a United States company. And they don't want to burn their own company. It's a huge part of their economic productivity. And so airplane and different types of aerospace technologies are produced in the United States. You also think about Elon Musk and his spaceship production. What the heck am I? SpaceX. That we're going to be sending astronauts up to the International Space Station and more with SpaceX technology, which is a U.S. company. So these are the types of high-end industries that are being done in the United States. And so the last of last things I'm going to give you today is the idea of just-in-time delivery. So earlier in this presentation, we looked at the post-Fordism. This is a huge part of that. Today, MDCs, more developed countries, industries are super complex. Not like the simple simple assembly line model that Henry Ford came up with. But you don't want to waste your space in your facilities storing equipment you may or may not need at that very moment. So what happens is, because costs are associated with land transportation and labor, many industries only receive components when they need them for sales. So whenever cars are produced, the different, I'll see you later, Madison, thanks for sticking with me. You'll see different manufacturers that produce chairs, or I guess seats within cars, or different parts of the car, maybe the wheels or whatever it might be. And then what they're going to do is they're going to send it to the manufacturer to produce the cars when they need the cars. Then immediately those cars are going to be brought to dealerships in local areas and sold to consumers. Same for the way these computers are made. No one's going to be storing tons of Apple iMacs or whatever it is in a facility somewhere waiting for someone to buy them. They're going to make them as they need it. And logistically, they know that because they keep track of the data using complex computer systems. Starbucks literally told our group they are a just-in-time facility. That's the reason why they get the coffee in, they roast it, they send it out within maximum 48 hours, never more than that. They run all the time. And there are all the examples that I just gave you. The main thing I want you to take from this, that geography is paramount to this process. Listen, if something slows down one leg of this process, the whole thing is screwed. All right. So I wanted you guys to end with that. These are actually resources from last time. Whenever I get the PowerPoint finished up and sent in, I'm going to make sure I add the new resources. I didn't get around to that or creating the summary, but that's all I have for you today. A lot of stuff. I knew that I was going to go maybe a little over an hour anyway. Sorry about the holdups at the front. Guys, I appreciate you being with me. I hope this was helpful. If it is, make sure that your friends know about it. Make sure the teachers know about it. I mean, we are only a few weeks away from the AP exam, and you guys want to be as prepared for that as you possibly can. So I'll be back next week. Let me know what I can do. If you guys have any more comments, I'll be here for a few more minutes. Stick them in the comments, and I appreciate you guys being with me. Thanks a lot, Vikram. Thanks a lot, Miss Banner, for bringing your class along like always. Always appreciate that. And everyone else, thanks for sticking with me.